Welcome to the Black Belt in Leadership podcast. My name is Aslak de Silva. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Lama Tantrapa. He is a Tibetan Lama and the 27th generation lineage holder of Chidao, a Tibetan shamanic Qigong. Lama Tantrapa has devoted his life to teaching resilience, presence, and the art of being in the flow. He is the founder of Academy of Chidao, as well as the World Resilience Summit and Resilience Center. With decades of experience integrating martial arts, energy, work, and coaching, he helps leaders and communities build embodied resilience to thrive in uncertain times. In this conversation, we'll explore what resilience truly means for leaders, how to train it the same way we train body and mind, and how spiritual development ties it all together. Welcome to the show, Lama.
Thank you, Aslak. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm in awe. So 27th generation lineage, it's not something that you have just picked up. You were given the heritage of living the life in a way you're teaching, right?
I studied with my grandfather mostly, who was a lineage holder before me. My father didn't go deep into these studies, probably due to the teenage trauma that he experienced, received severe burn. And so he survived to live to the ripe age of 85. He did not study as deeply as I did. There are pros and cons to being a lineage holder.
Mm.
There's a lot of responsibility. You have to carry the responsibility on your shoulders of passing on this knowledge to others.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And it's such a long lineage, so the burden must be big. Resilience is something that we, in today's world, especially with everything's happening around us and to us. So it's a word that is used a lot in leadership circles. How do you define resilience in a way that goes deeper than just bouncing back? What does resilience really mean to you?
Well, to me, it's bouncing forward, actually. In other words, you get stronger as a result of experiencing challenges and setbacks, even though the setbacks don't feel great in the
Mm.
moment. But if you live to tell the story, usually those are the times that will stick in your memory. Those are the greatest learning opportunities. Those people who don't learn from setbacks look back at them and perceive them as problems. And they say, oh, my life is so full of problems. And then they also look into the future in their imagination. Imagine the future also having problems. So they essentially dread the future just as much as they bemoan the past. And what resilient people do is learn from their experiences. And the more challenging the experience, the greater the lesson that is contained therein, which means we don't run away from challenges. In fact, we realize that life is like a video game.
Mm.
If you graduate from level one and go to level two is not going to be easier than level one. It's going to be more challenging. And then you graduate to level three. Well, that's not going to be any easier either. In other words, the further you progress, the more challenging things get. It's
Mm.
just like in martial arts training. When you receive black belt, you must have been beaten up enough.
Mm.
If you haven't, well, you definitely will get beat up.
Mm.
And once you get the second degree black belt, it's not going to get any easier. Things are only going to get tougher. You get to the third, to the fourth degree, and so on. Each step is not going to be any easier. It's a mistake to think that when we become more advanced along certain path, the things are supposed to get easier.
Mm.
No, they're supposed to get tougher. You are supposed to get more resilient so that you can handle the challenges.
I love that. And that's a good approach to thinking of it. So, if I understood you correctly, it's accepting it's going to get tougher, but you are also stronger when you have overcome some of your setbacks.
Exactly. In other words, that's the only way to get stronger. It's like strength training.
Mm.
You don't get stronger because you're sitting in a couch watching TV all day long. You get stronger because you experience challenges and put your muscles and your whole body through a certain ordeal. And once you experience the benefits of that, you get stronger. Well, don't go back to sitting on a couch.
Mm.
Move on to the next ordeal, the next level of training. It's just like if you lift weights. Well, you may start with a relatively light weight and feel challenged by those, but then
Mm.
you go to slightly heavier and then heavier weights. You don't go back to the lighter weights and say, okay, I'm going to just lift these for the rest of my life.
Yeah, very true. And that sometimes is the hard part. When you have achieved a certain level, to push yourself to the next level is the hard part. Sometimes you have to just give up for some reasons, but then will you bring yourself back and continue? So that's the hard one. But if you think of your experience, what are the biggest mistakes leaders make when they think they are practicing resilience? What are the mistakes that we often do that you see happening?
Well, most leaders, as far as I know, do not practice resilience. Very, very few, maybe 1% or less,
Mm.
would actually say, I consciously practice resilience in the context of my leadership. What does it mean? It means leaders often do not recognize how much the challenges they experience as leaders train them to become more resilient and ultimately better leaders.
Mm.
Everyone wants to run away from challenges or mitigate them or reduce them. Very few say, I'm looking forward to these challenges.
Mm.
Just like you and I competed in martial arts. You don't go into a tournament thinking, I look forward to a really easy opponent because I hope that he's not going to punch me. That would be silly, right?
Yeah.
Well, so in other words, you go into the fight knowing that some punches, some kicks, some other trouble is coming your way. You're not going into the fight hoping to run away from those challenges.
Mm.
You're going into the fight knowing that this challenge is going to put you on the edge of your comfort zone and potentially throw you over the edge.
Mm.
But that's how growth happens. Now, if you get thrown over the edge too much, you get overwhelmed, and
Mm.
then you will naturally try to recoil or go back into the comfort zone to recuperate, recharge, regroup. But then you'll probably be ready to go out and face the challenges again. What most people do not understand is most of our dreams and aspirations reside outside of our comfort zone.
Mm.
If they were within our comfort zone, we would be living them by now. We wouldn't be aspiring to achieve them. What happens is that it's not comfortable to get to the dream. That's why we haven't manifested it yet.
Mm.
That's why when people try to manifest something or achieve something that is outside of the comfort zone, they often fail because they push themselves over the edge trying to get to this place outside of their comfort zone, but they experience discomfort and pain, and then they recoil or run back into the comfort zone to lick the wounds, so to speak.
Mm.
What I teach and practice is how to change this approach radically. Instead of pushing yourself over the edge of the comfort zone, trying to get somewhere where the dream is, I teach to get to the edge of the comfort zone, which requires mindfulness, the big buzzword nowadays.
Mm.
You literally have to be mindful as to the edges of your comfort zone. And then you turn at about 90 degrees. You
Mm.
start moving along the edge rather than pushing yourself over the edge. As you start moving along the edge of the comfort zone, something amazing is going to happen.
Mm.
You are neither overwhelmed, which is what happens outside the comfort zone, nor are you underwhelmed if you are in the middle of a comfort zone. You find that balance point between overwhelm and underwhelm, or in the words of Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the author of the book Flow and other books on the topic, you experience the flow state. When you find the challenge matching your capabilities.
Mm.
That's when you enjoy being in the flow, even though it is challenging, because you are neither overwhelmed by the challenge nor are you feeling bored because your capabilities are greater than your
Yeah.
challenges. And so that's exactly what I teach and practice, how to develop this attitude of finding the balance point and then exploring what it's like to be on the edge of the comfort zone. How do you explore? Well, just like most martial artists, most athletes for that matter, want to become more flexible. So what do? They stretch. It's a common idea. You need to stretch in order to become more flexible. The problem, though, is that when you pull the muscle beyond its comfort zone, which is the definition of stretching, the spindle, the nerve ending inside of the muscle tissue, will send the signal of alarm to the central nervous system, saying, Alarm, this muscle is being overstretched. You need to protect it.
Mm.
How is the central nervous system going to protect a muscle that is getting stretched? By sending signals of contraction so that this muscle doesn't get torn. That's what we call the stretch reflex. The muscle receives more signals of contraction from the central nervous system. It starts tensing up. That's what everyone experiences after stretching. And then the following morning, you get out of bed. Why can't I walk?
Mm.
Oh, I must have overstretched. You probably experienced that yourself a few times, and every person who has done stretching experienced it too. But then what do they think? They think, I'm so stiff, I need to stretch, which only adds insult to injury. If you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, that's the sign of insanity. And that's exactly what everyone is doing. We live in a world full of insanity, where people do not connect the dots between cause and effect. According to the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism, this is also the cause of suffering, ignorance as to the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. So here is the spiritual aspect of our practice. We learn how to become responsible for our own suffering because nobody's doing it to us. We are doing it ourselves, single-handedly creating our own suffering, adding insult to injury when we do not understand how to achieve what we set out to achieve. Now, it's your turn to ask me, so how are you going to manifest the dream that is outside your comfort zone if you are moving along the edge instead of going for the dream?
Yeah. How is that done?
The longer time you spend exploring the edges of your comfort zone, the more you get used to being on the edge. By doing that, your comfort zone expands. Naturally, organically, it gets broader, and you actually observe how your comfort zone becomes broad enough to include that which used to be outside the comfort zone before, including those dreams and aspirations that were previously outside the comfort zone. In other words, if you had a dream of becoming more flexible, instead of stretching the muscle, you go to the edge of the comfort zone and you start exploring. Oh, how can I move so that I experience maximum range of motion without pushing myself over the edge? And that's when your body feels in the flow. You enjoy the experience and you feel like, I can't wait to do more of that. It's just like in the morning, you articulate, you kind of wiggle around and don't stretch. Just explore the full range of motion. That is what we do in the context of flexibility. This is just one of dozens of examples of how I train what I call embodied resilience. If you learn how to embody this principle, then you can apply it anywhere else because you are a walking manifestation of this principle. You are the embodiment of it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks for opening that up. I'm smiling here, so it feels like a really good lesson to learn and understand in a way that go to the edge to train and enjoy it. And you will know when you pass the edge. It doesn't feel comfortable, so you can take that step back and start enjoying that level. And the more you are there, the edge also moves. I was very stiff and I started training martial arts. I could become more flexible. And that's day by day routines, but also understanding that if you push too hard, you actually don't become more flexible. The same with physical training. I mean, that you cannot always break your records. And if you just go for that maybe 95% of your strength and keep that day after day, suddenly your records are already broken that you were never able to do before.
Yes, and it becomes a consistent practice. And the beauty of it is that this consistent practice is pleasant. That's the challenge, to make the practice so desirable for your body that you don't have to discipline yourself, because very few people have enough self-discipline.
Mm,
Let's admit that. If something requires a lot of self-discipline, most likely people will not be able to stick with that program.
mm,
It's just like health clubs have a lot of new members in January. Everyone makes New Year's resolutions. They want to become fit and strong and slim, so they join the gym. And then a month or two later, they're nowhere to be seen. Why is that? Because the culture of movement associated with the gym activities, by and large, is not very harmonious.
mm,
It's just linear, jerky start-stop movements that isolate certain parts of the body instead of integrating. They don't facilitate integration of physiology with the physical actions. They literally create more disharmony. I'm not against physical exercise whatsoever. I used to own a gym. That's how I know how
mm,
gyms work. What happens is that people drop out because they don't feel good about doing their workouts. In other words, if you have to force yourself to do something day in and day out, eventually you'll just quit because you don't feel motivated anymore. But if your body feels like, I can't wait to do more of this, then you don't have to use self-discipline.
mm,
You feel like, wow, I'm doing this just naturally, and my body thanks me for doing it. I guess that's the right thing to do. That's the distinction that I draw between the harmonious culture of movement and harmonious strength training that I teach and practice, as opposed to disharmonious culture of movement and disharmonious strength training that we observe in 90+% of all strength training and movement programs.
mm. Very good clarification there, yeah. Go maybe more in depth for leaders. Of course, martial artists, we train under pressure. You have sparring, you have fighting, you even push your limits just to test your capabilities. But how can leaders train resilience in a safe but effective way before the real crisis hits?
If you are training for crisis, then you are in the right place, my friend.
Mm,
If you want to live in peace, prepare for war.
yeah.
It sounds strange coming from a Tibetan Lama. I'm supposed to be a peaceful Lama, right?
Yeah.
But when I was young and stupid, I served in special forces. I worked as a bodyguard and had a bodyguarding company protecting foreign businessmen coming to Ukraine from
Mm,
getting kidnapped.
mm,
Because back in the 90s, it was a tough country that was not safe, not only for foreign businessmen, but also for Ukrainian businessmen like myself. Even though I was a bodyguard, I got kidnapped for ransom.
yeah.
And what happened is that I realized we have to train for this kind of challenges. I literally had to rework my own sense of identity,
Mm,
because a bodyguard, a person who's supposed to protect other people from getting kidnapped, actually gets kidnapped.
mm,
That happened to me. I lived to tell the story because my company got sold by my business partner in 3 days.
mm,
And my portion of the proceeds from the sale of the company went into the ransom payment. However, I also learned a great deal.
mm,
I decided to move to the United States, and that's where I ended up also opening Academy of Qidao, the school where I teach and practice how to be in the flow.
Mm.
So that is what I offer to leaders, the skills and training practices that empower them to be in a flow on demand. What does it mean in the context of leadership? It's pretty obvious. You perform at peak. If you're a martial artist, your ass doesn't get beat so much. If you are an athlete, you run faster, jump harder, climb more elegantly, or dance more beautifully. Whatever you do, you perform better when you're on the flow. But what does it mean to be in the flow in the context of leadership? Well, leaders achieve greater results, spending less time, energy, and effort. What results do leaders look for? Greater influence,
Mm.
greater compliance, engendering creativity in their subordinates, creating greater cohesion in their teams so that the corporate culture is more conducive to productivity instead of bickering or office politics. And in general, people feel like they're thriving when they're going to work instead of dreading going to work. So that's one of the things that I teach and practice, how to develop these skills, becoming resilient to challenges, but also training and coaching your subordinates or your team members in such a way that they stop getting overwhelmed, stressed out, and then get burnt out and quit. But instead, they also develop resilience. And you can only teach resilience by example. You cannot tell people, go do more resilience training. If you are not resilient, it will be very hypocritical. We want to lead by example, demonstrating that it's possible to be in a flow. It's possible to overcome challenges and perceive them as learning opportunities and be grateful for having those challenges. If the leader demonstrates that to his or her teams, what happens? They gain greater respect. People follow them more enthusiastically.
Mm.
They influence them without trying. And most importantly, this culture of resilience spreads through the teams so that people start developing these qualities themselves.
Mm.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. Like many times, people value the leader who walks the talk, right? They want to follow leaders who are doing the things first, right? This is a great example of how it spreads. As a leader, you show the example and show resilience in everyday life. Then the team follows that and learns. All of us have our own obstacles, setbacks in our lives. It's just seeing it around us, how people cope with that, how they overcome and move forward. So I think that is a great lesson for all of us that we can learn around the people that we are surrounded with. I agree with that too.
Fantastic. And in the context of spiritual development, you brought that up. How do we integrate that? Well, I have to draw the line between spirituality and religion
Mm.
because a lot of people in Western cultures confuse spirituality and religion. To me, they're not the same. Religion is full of rituals, dogmas, ceremonies, or certain outward expressions, whether it is the beautiful temples or churches or certain religious rites or outfits people wear, as opposed to spirituality that is not focused on appearances,
Mm.
but rather focuses on the true essence of the spiritual practices and requires practice, not just attending the sermons or services, but actually practicing something that moves the needle for the practitioner, whether it's meditation or contemplation or certain energy practices that I teach. I teach Qigong, which is an energy art. I also teach and practice Tibetan Dream Yoga, a traditional spiritual discipline that teaches you how to become lucid or awake in your dreams, both in dreams at night as well as in daydreams, and ultimately in the big dream called life.
Mm.
That's what we call enlightenment. And if we are on the path of enlightenment, We learn how to achieve incremental but relatively consistent milestones along this path. It's somewhat similar to the path of mastery in the context of martial arts or most sports. We also talk about mastery or somebody is a master of such art. But if you ask a master, what does it look like from your point of view to be a master? Often the masters, at least the ones that are worth their salt,
Mm.
will say, you know, I just chop wood and carry water. In other words, being a master is you realize that you are mastering something. You are in the process of becoming more masterful, but there is no end to this. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Nobody among masters I've met, and I've been interviewing masters from my podcast for 16 years, ever said to me, I've achieved the pinnacle of personal development. I'm a master of all masters. Now I'm sitting here at the top and there's nowhere to go. There is no room for improvement. Nobody ever said that. That means there is plenty of room for improvement. You are on a journey of mastery
Mm.
rather than on a journey to mastery. If we apply the same line of reasoning to spirituality, then we realize we are on a journey of enlightenment rather than on a journey to enlightenment.
Mm.
That, my friend, is the lesson of the day. How we apply this approach so that we can constantly make incremental but consistent improvements.
Mm.
How can we travel along the path of mastery and the path of enlightenment in the context of leadership development or personal development? We have to work on personal development in order to become decent leaders. There are few decent leaders that are not particularly well personally developed. However, there are some examples. I'm not going to bring up names, but a few come to mind. Some people who are unscrupulous also can attain the status of a leader,
Mm.
and often it becomes like a cult of personality or cult of the party or some other type of cult, because they are not leading by example, they are leading by decree. And that's the low quality leadership. And usually those cult leaders eventually get revealed as such, and people regret that they were participating in this cult. But it may take years for that to happen. And meanwhile, they may feel like the
Mm.
most powerful person in the world. However, we don't want to be like that. We want to lead by example. We want to practice personal development in order to practice leadership development. So that's my 2 cents to contribute.
Thank you so much. I'm learning so much. Thanks for this, but maybe still digging more into the spirituality part because that's something that we don't talk about so much, at least in the Western culture and leadership. It might be something personal that people might feel, but it's not something that we talk. Do you see that we are off balance with that, or is it more like the self-reflection? What kind of advice would you give us? Maybe the first steps to understand and not to make it something that you are ashamed to mention or talk about or even ask about friends. So you ask a lot of questions about how to lead, but you maybe don't ask so much about how to be more spiritual in this situation or what to look for. What are the first steps that we should take, in your opinion, here?
That's a great question. I would say number one is necessary to distinguish between the appearances and the essence of things. When we pursue the appearances, we follow the religion track. If we want to pursue spiritual development, we have to refocus our attention from the appearances and forms of things to their true essence. Now, what's the true essence of things? Well, it's energy. Everyone who graduated from high school, at least theoretically, would agree that everything in our universe is energy. But how many people actually live their lives this way with this level of recognition and understanding of energetic nature of reality? By energetic nature of reality, I mean we learn how to recognize that everything is energy of certain frequency.
Mm.
Different frequencies resonate with each other differently, or dissonance happens when they don't resonate. What happens when we experience dissonance? For example, if the energy that we identify with, who we think we are, is experiencing dissonance with another person's energy. Well, they make us cringe, or we feel like that person is really not on the same page with us. We do not understand each other. Now, what happens if we switch our attention from how much we don't resonate with that person towards any aspects of this person that I actually do resonate with, I appreciate, or I'm grateful for? Is there anything that I can learn from this person? That would be a really simple first step. Is there anything that I can learn from virtually everyone that I come across or people that I hear about? Let's say I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. So I'm a refugee from the United States living in Denmark now.
Mm.
Not that I ran away from Donald Trump. I moved to Denmark for other reasons. However, I experienced something. I learned resilience from Donald Trump.
Mm.
I don't particularly resonate with him, but I recognize how resilient he is. No matter how much discomfort he experiences when people criticize him or call him names or whatever they say about him, even judges who adjudicate him to be a serial user or swindler, it still goes on, becomes the United States president. Now, there's resilience there. You don't have to love somebody to recognize that there is something that they exhibit that
Mm.
you appreciate or can learn from.
True.
Can we learn from somebody who got shot on the campaign trail,
Mm.
still got elected? Well, that shot probably is what got him elected. But there is something to learn from all kinds of things. I certainly see that if we look at other people and recognize there is something that I do resonate with this person, then we focus on similarities instead of focusing on differences. When we focus on differences, we wage wars. When we focus on similarities, we wage peace. That would be the number one approach that I would invite everyone who listens to our interview to explore. How can you focus on similarities with people? How can you find at least a little bit of something that you appreciate within virtually anyone? You may not agree with people, you may even find yourself in a combat with them, but you still may find something that you may learn from them. That would be an enlightened way to relate to everyone.
I love that and really deep there. Often when we get frustrated, we only see the negative things. So how to open up our minds and hearts in a way that we look at the positive things and the similarities there. Just have maybe presence in a way. What does, in your opinion, the role of presence, like being fully here and now, play in both resilience and leadership? I sense a lot of presence talking with you, and it makes me listen to you very much. You have very strong presence. So what do you see the role of presence in resilience and leadership?
This is a presence of mind that is energetic presence. It's like you walk into a room, you don't have to wear some fancy clothes, you don't have to move in a certain funny way, but people will be like, wow, this person, who is he? He has presence. Now, that is the presence I advocate for. However, there are many teachers, for example, Eckhart Tolle, who write books about or talk about presence as being in here and now. Well, there is no way to be in here now because now is such a fleeting moment between the past and the future
Mm.
that is constantly moving. And when you think you got into the present moment, you're not present because you're thinking.
Mm.
And it takes a split second to formulate that thought, but you already are thinking about the past, the recent past that just happened. You are no longer present. It's impossible to really find yourself being present. So we stop fooling ourselves about that. And we learn how to develop that presence of mind, energetic presence, physical presence, and acceptance without trying to find the tiny sliver between the vast plateaus of the past and the future, because it's a moving target which is impossible to get into.
Mm.
I'm not saying that philosophically it's a bad idea to be present. I'm saying that practically speaking, it's impossible to find yourself being fully present. However, what distracts us from the experience of life more fully is constant daydreaming. We want to get a handle on our dreams. I'm not advocating suppressing dreams or trying to get rid of them because it would be like trying to throw the baby with the bathwater.
Mm.
It's important to daydream. It's important to have some ideas about the future and maybe daydream about things that you want to manifest, or perhaps remember things about the past. My parents are in their 80s, both experiencing dementia.
Mm.
Now, they're present because they don't remember whatever you said a minute or two ago, and they have no idea about the future either. I'm not advocating dementia. I'm advocating developing the ability to expand the definition of presence. So it does not depend on the present moment. In other words, what's the moment? Maybe just split second. How about we expand it to maybe a few minutes and eventually maybe a few hours? With practice, maybe it will encapsulate a few days or weeks or even months. This becomes your bigger energy bubble. This becomes your field of energy that you experience not only temporarily in terms of the flow of time, but also spatially in terms of your physical presence. That is how you influence people. Without that energetic presence, you won't influence anyone. You will feel like a ping pong ball on a pool table. You're just bouncing around because every other energy being that you come across bounces you because you're so light and you don't have much momentum or weight. What we do is we learn how to develop a greater sense of physical and energetic presence so that we don't feel like the ping pong ball on the pool table. We start developing the energetic presence that feels like we are on par with other pool table balls. We are not being overwhelmed by another person's presence. Eventually, we may even develop greater presence beyond matching the heft of the other pool table balls. Maybe we start feeling like a bowling ball on the pool table. Now, that would be presence. That is leadership. The bowling ball doesn't get bounced around even if other pool table balls hit it. It maintains certain momentum or certain gravitas. How do we develop it? Well, join our programs. If you visit academyofchidao.com, you will discover for yourself how to become more resilient as a leader.
Very good. Thanks for this lesson and thanks for all the teachings that you gave us today. I hope the listeners also got a lot. I got very much from him. So thank you so much, Lama Tantrapa, for this. And so if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you to be in touch?
Well, my name, tantrapa.com, that's the easy one, or academyofchidao.com. Either one of those websites would be a good one to visit. I also organize World Resilience Summits. So resiliencesummit.org is a great website to visit. I'm also the founder and leader of Mastery Dojo, an international online community of people who follow the path of mastery. That's masterydojo.com.
Very nice. Thanks for sharing those. And one more time, thank you so much for everything that you taught us today. And I hope that people will reach out and learn a lot more from you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And thanks for all the listeners for joining today. I really hope that these lessons help you to unlock the black belt in leadership within you.